Timeline of life, Mesozoic Era. The Mesozoic Era is also known as the Age of the Dinosaurs. It was from about 252 million years ago to 60 million years ago, and is divided into three periods: the Triassic period, the Jurassic period, and the Cretaceous period. It began at a time of the Permian extinction, which had wiped out about 96% of marine life and 70% of all terrestrial life. It was during this time that life began to rebound. It was much warmer than today, and there were no polar ice caps. It was also during this time that the supercontinent Pangaea was formed. Pangaea was covered in large swaths of desert with very little to no coastlines. However, there was rainforests around the equator. The Triassic period lasted from 251 million years ago to 199 million years ago. It was the first of the three periods that make up the Mesozoic era. The ichthyosaurs became the predominant animals of marine life after the Permian extinction. They started out more lizard-like, with their bodies swimming side to side, similar to the way modern eels swim. However, by the end of the Triassic period, they developed more dolphin-like bodies with long-toothed snout. They were known as air breathers and gave birth to live young. They could be up to 50 feet long and would weigh 30 tons. Ironically, insects survived the Permian extinction, and the only new insect that came to be during the Triassic period was the grasshopper. The most significant part of the Triassic period was the growth of the giant reptiles. One of the early reptiles was the archosaurs. They had two temporal openings in the skull and teeth, and they grew up to be 20 feet long. By the mid-Triassic period, they became bipedal, which means they walked up on two legs. They had long, sinuous necks, sharp teeth, clawed hands, and a long tail, and there are evidence that they may have hunted in packs. These early pterosaurs were actually gliders, and they would glide from tree to tree. They were about the size of a crow, with a wing membrane that would attach to the hind legs. Acarasaurus were about the size of a hummingbird, and they had wing-like features that seemed to sprout from their ribs. And then finally, at the end of the Triassic period, we began to see some very early mammals. They were about only a few inches long. They were either herbivores, which means they ate plants, or insectivores, which means they ate insects. They laid eggs, they had fur, and there is evidence that they suckled their young. After the Triassic period came the Jurassic period. This is the period that most people associate with the dinosaurs. However, our largest dinosaurs won't actually come until afterwards in the Cretaceous period. The Jurassic period was from about 199 million years ago and lasted till about 145 million years ago. If you look at the map of what the Earth would have looked like during the Jurassic period, we can see where Pangaea began to split apart. The Jurassic period also saw a huge increase in plant life, such as the ginkgo tree, as well as gymnosperms, which is another word for the conifers that developed. This was a new type of species because it allowed for wind distribution of pollen. Sauropods were lizard-hipped dinosaurs. They were quadrupeds, which means they walked on four legs. They had long necks and heavy tails. This Brachiosaurus is one example of a sauropod. It was about 100 feet long and would weigh over 100 tons. It had a small skull and a brain, and it lived on every continent except Antarctica. This is a Stegosaurus. He was about the size of a bus, about 30 feet long. He was plant-eating. He had 2 rows of bony plates for protection along his back. Pterosaurs were flying reptiles and not the early ancestors to birds. They did have wings that would attach from their front arms up to their hind legs, but it was made up of mainly skin and strong muscle membranes. Allosaurus were carnivores. They were smaller than the Tyrannosaurus rex that we will find in the Cretaceous period. They had longer jaws and heavy front limbs that they could use to catch prey and to feed themselves. This is an Atolobacillus, a very early mammal. It was a shrew-like animal that was covered in fur. The Cretaceous period was the last period within the Mesozoic era. The Cretaceous period was the longest lasting period of the Mesozoic era, lasting 79 million years. As you can see, the continents are closer to their modern configuration. It was during the Cretaceous period that we also began to see the early forms of flowering plants. This is an example of an Archaea fructus. It is most similar to an early form of a black pepper plant. We have also found fossils of bees and wasps from this time period. Thus became the beautiful relationship between the flying insects and flowering plants. This is a Confuciusornis. It is a crow-sized bird that has beaks, feathers, and claws at the tips of its wings. The Apatosaurus grew 69 to 75 feet long and weighed about 39 tons. It too was an herbivore, meaning it ate plants. The Diplodocus grew to be 90 feet long and weighed approximately 17 tons. It had a whip-like tail that it could whip back and forth at supersonic speed. It had 5 toes on each of its 4 legs, and it too ate plants. The Ankylosaurus was an armored dinosaur. It was covered in plates all over its body and rows of spikes across its back. It also had a club-like plate at the end of its tail that it could use to ward off its enemies. This dinosaur, because of its armored plating, made it very difficult for predators to get to it. He was also an herbivore, living largely on plants. The Triceratops is one of the most famous dinosaurs out of the Cretaceous period. It is so easily recognized by its big shape of the 3 horns and the fan that goes across the back of its neck. It was about the size of an African elephant. It was about 30 feet long and weighs about 13,000 pounds. It too was an herbivore. The Tyrannosaurus rex, known as the king of the dinosaurs. It is one of many species of dinosaurs that were carnivores, which means they ate meat. It stood 13 feet tall and was about 40 feet long and weighed about 9 tons. However, it was unable to stand completely erect. Believe it or not, with its large body, it could actually move very quickly. It is estimated that it could run at about 10 to 25 miles per hour. It also had 2-fingered forearms that were very puny and had very little ability to eat or to help catch its prey. T-Rex was also known for having the strongest bite. Its large jaws could bite into its prey with about 12,814 pounds of force with serrated teeth. About 65.5 million years ago, there was a massive extinction event that occurred on the Earth in which nearly all large vertebrates and many tropical invertebrates became extinct. Over the years, there have been many theories as to what happened during this time. One such theory was that a meteor or an asteroid struck the Earth, sending shock waves, giant tsunamis, hot rock and dust in the atmosphere and starting many fires across the planet. One thing we do know for sure is that the age of dinosaurs, the giant dinosaurs, have become extinct. Smaller species of animals were able to survive this extinction and would lead into the next era, the Cenozoic era.